our brain is really good at connecting things. So say we've all had traumas, whether they're huge traumas or little traumas throughout our life, whether it was a broken arm when we were 6 or it was child abuse. Like we've had traumas, and our brain connects these traumas and teaches it this is how we respond when something's bad. So when we have a new trauma, say a car accident, say a birth trauma. I do a lot of birth trauma work, and I love when I get to do it within the first couple of weeks after birth. It's so powerful, and like the healing is phenomenally fast. But like if you can do it within the first couple of weeks to within the first couple of months after whatever the new trauma is, the trauma doesn't have time to connect itself to every other previous trauma. So you get to work on this new trauma without it being so entrenched and connected to everything else.
Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Amy Grace. And she is a speaker, a licensed therapist, and a super mom. I love that. And I'll read her bio. Amy Grace has spent the last 26 years centering her life on motherhood. As a licensed therapist, she has spent her career supporting moms across the lifespan to be the healthiest, happiest versions of themselves by healing past wounds and thriving in their unique gifts, strengths, and personalities. She continues this mission through her podcast, Everyday Supermoms, writing, speaking, and living her best life as a mom to her combined 6 kids. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for what you do. I'm really excited about this because I think this is an area that's really important that we work in, and kind of the topic we're going to kind of talk about is how often parenting can highlight the areas we still need to heal and grow in. And I was sharing with you before we started the recording, I so wish I had that back in the day when I was a new mom because, and I've shared on my podcast so many times that I live my adult life in not only in survival mode, but victim mindset. They kind of shifted back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So, I there was a lot of things I was aware of. There was a lot of things that I did to protect my son and, but I can see areas that if someone would have just come alongside me, it would have made my life so much easier.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and a lot of times before we come into motherhood, we may have even already done a lot of work on ourselves, right? Like for people whose traumas happened long before they became a mother, like they may feel like, oh, I've actually been coping with this just fine. Mm-hmm. But it's fascinating how motherhood can bring out both the best and the worst in us. And it can highlight those exact spots that we still need some progress in.
Yes, that is so true. Oh yeah. It just, I don't know, there's some buttons that get pushed when we become mothers that don't get pushed at any other times in our life that are just, there's just that, especially when you're a new mom, those insecurities. I can go back and just, you want to do everything right. The baby can't talk to you, so you don't understand what's going on. And just all the newness of it.
Mm-hmm. The newness of it, the sheer fact that you're not at your best in those first months because you're not sleeping, you're not eating, your body feels weird, like all these different aspects of the early stages of motherhood. You may be in physical pain, you may be just in the pain of not having a good night's sleep and God knows how long. Yeah. And you're just not functioning the best. So your ability to even function as well as you could have before has gone down while your new triggers have gone up. And so it's not surprising to me at all how many moms struggle in that first, honestly, the first couple of years, because there's so much transition that happens, like whether it's your first baby or your 12th baby, but I think also, especially in that first baby, because your whole world starts to shift from I am me to I am mom. And that is a big shift.
Mm-hmm. That's a big shift. Yeah. Oh, God, I remember those. And just not sleeping, the first 6 weeks, I think, he had me up every single hour. But the blessing was after 6 weeks, he started sleeping through the night, just literally overnight.
Well, that's lovely.
But the first 6 weeks, oh my gosh, I can just remember, he would cry. I had a routine. I'd keep the lights out. I would get up and, nurse him on one side and kind of, nurse him on the other and try to keep him tired. And, I was so tired that I literally, when I would get up, I would put my hand over his head to protect him in case I bumped into something, because I was so tired. And
Yeah.
just, the things that my body was going through, after having a baby, a little of
Mm-hmm.
the, baby blues that came along.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he cried and I couldn't comfort him, it would just spiral me out. And then I had
Yeah.
a really hard
Well,
labor and delivery.
that was one of the things I was going to say is then you add on to that, even a smooth labor and delivery is actually a traumatic experience for what our bodies go through.
Yeah.
If you then have a traumatic labor and delivery, if you have, say, an emergency C-section or something goes wrong with either you or baby, then that's a new trauma that happens in that moment. And if
Mm-hmm.
you have any history of trauma from before then, all of that can get reactivated from that sense of feeling out of control and, you know, pain and fear and all of these pieces that can come up in that moment can reactivate what you thought were healed things. And all of a sudden you're like, why am I thinking about that thing from 10 years ago?
I know. And it's like, I know for me, I felt like, okay, I'm a mom now, so I'm supposed to know how to do this. I'm just supposed to know how to do this. It should come automatic. And, you know, I had, I can't think of I can't think of her last name right now. I had a doctor, a doula on my podcast, and she talks about the fourth trimester. And she
Mm-hmm.
talks about the support that the moms need, in that fourth trimester. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such an untapped, you know,
Mm-hmm.
serious, what am I trying to say? Time,
Mm-hmm.
of a new mother, is that fourth trimester. It's really interesting. But I remember thinking, oh, I should know what to do. I should just automatically know what to do. I became a mom. But it's not like
Right.
that. It's not
Yeah,
like that.
well, and there's really very few other things in the entire world that we expect somebody to be able to do perfectly as they start to learn it. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't even take a 10-year-old out back and throw him a football and assume he's going to throw you a perfect spiral. You know, you wouldn't put somebody in a operating room and say do a surgery when they haven't been to med school. But we plop women into motherhood and go, be a mom. And we put this pressure on ourselves to have it all figured out from day one.
Hey, thank you for listening so far. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you won't ever miss an episode. Right, right, right. And I babysat a lot when I was a teenager. So and I babysat a lot of babies. So I thought,
Mm-hmm.
I got this. But no, there's something very different when it's your
Very
own,
different.
and they put that baby in your arms, and you have all those emotions and all those feelings and everything that's going through you. Yeah, it can be very, very confusing, and difficult. I know it was for me, and I had a little bit of the baby blues. It wasn't bad. It was about 5 days later, and I kind of worked through it. But I still feel like I'm trying to catch up on my sleep.
Oh my goodness. I feel like, does it ever go back to 100% normal? Because I feel like
Yeah,
mom
no.
mode gets activated, and they've proven that women sleep a lot lighter than men do because
Yeah.
we're designed to be able to wake up for that baby. And we don't just wake up when they're an infant. We wake up when we hear like a boom in the middle of the night, and we're like, what just
Exactly.
happened? And they're like 16, and we're like, are they still in the house? Did they leave? What's going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah,
Like, we're
exactly.
like tuned to that, and that doesn't
Yeah.
go away.
No,
Yeah.
no, I do that with my grandchildren now.
You're still tuned to it. Yeah.
Still in tune, definitely. It's weird how you get very in tune with them.
Hmm.
Hey, if you're ready to go deeper in your healing journey, join our 6-week workshop. Sign up today at womenschildhoodabusehhealingworkshop.com or click on the link below. I'd love to see you there and help you on your healing journey. Parenting can highlight the areas we still need to heal and grow in. Why don't you talk a little
Hmm.
more about that? Because you started to talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And it can look so many different ways. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of times where maybe you've done a lot of work and you're like, I'm doing great. And then all of a sudden, some stage of motherhood, it could be early motherhood, it could be later. But all of a sudden, you start to see things in yourself that you're not super proud of. Maybe you're seeing some mom rage and you're seeing anger coming out at your kid or your partner or somebody else or yourself, and you've never even been an angry person and you're like, where is this coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Or you're realizing that your anxiety and you're worrying all the time, or you're realizing that you're like on alert, like all the time, like what's going to go wrong,
Yeah.
or you're realizing that you're starting to have like negative thoughts about like yourself, about life, about all sorts of things. There's so many different ways. Like I could literally talk for an hour about all the different ways I've seen this show up with the women that I work with. And but it can come at any stage. And I think something that can happen sometimes is people make it through like the early motherhood and they're like, oh, I'm doing good. And then all of a sudden, maybe their kid's 4. I always thought 3s and 4s were much harder than 2s.
I
But
agree.
like they get these like little attitudes, the three-nager thing where they're like telling you how things are going to be, and all of a sudden
Yes.
things can come up in you and you're like, why am I fighting with a 3-year-old? I am definitely, this is not logical. And so
Yeah.
like you just start to notice these things. So some of the things that I think can really be highlighted is unresolved trauma. So maybe you've healed it greatly, but I see healing as like a cyclical thing, and we keep kind of going up like a
Yeah.
spiral staircase.
Yep.
So like we deal with it on this level, and then we, come up to another level of life and we're higher, and we've made progress, but we still got to keep touching on it.
Yep.
And that seems to be a lot of what happens with, say, healing from trauma, healing from all sorts of things. So it can be triggered by a trauma you experience in motherhood. It can be triggered by the lack of feeling like you're in control. One of the first lessons you learn as a parent is how little control you have. Like,
So
and anybody that's like, well, you need to control that child. I'm like, you clearly don't know how this works.
true. No. There's no
Because
controlling them.
there is not. There's, helping and guiding and, nurturing and directing
Yeah.
and all of that. But truly, you can't control them. You can't even get them to eat and sleep when you want them to. I mean, heck, I can't even always get myself to sleep when I want me to. So,
I know it is shocking, and it's like when you think you get ready to go to a family outing, and all of a sudden something comes up with the baby. How are you going to control that? You got to go change a diaper. You got to, the baby throws a fit. I mean, there's just so many things. You are not in control.
Yeah.
You are not in control.
Yeah. And for people who have had anxiety issues, people who have had a history of trauma, that feeling of not being in control can be very triggering and very scary.
Yep.
And it can bring a lot of that stuff back up.
Right.
There's, a lot of the other things that could be big triggers is the way that you parent with a partner if you have one, and how that delegation of responsibilities looks and how it's balanced or not. There's a lot of stuff that can come up in that. There's a lot of time I can hear that victim mentality kind of show up in that space.
Oh,
of
sure.
like, they never do anything. I have to do everything. Poor me. Woe is me. And not to say that that's not even necessarily true, because we know that moms still do the majority of the child rearing tasks and definitely the majority of the mental load. However, it's when it turns into this woe is me place that it's like, oh, there's a sign. I need to do something with this.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I can remember feeling like that too. And it was because I was the one that was getting up all night. I was the one that was nursing him. I was the one, and I remember feeling a little mad about that. And then I realized like there was nothing more my husband at the time could really do. That's just the situation we were in. He was doing, and he really was trying to do everything he could do to help me, and it was very stressful, and it was, being tired and not sleeping, being tired, and then I wasn't eating, right? Because all I cared about was sleeping. I didn't care about eating.
Yeah, and the second you sit down to try to eat, that's when the baby thinks it's their turn to eat. It's like they have some sense, like, oh, you're going to sit down? Then you should nurse me. Or you should get me a bottle. And you're like, but I just need a snack.
Yeah, they have a radar about that.
Yeah.
But, you brought something up a minute ago that I think is really true, that, I mean, don't you think that if somebody has a little anxiety with the trauma in their background, like that is probably the most prevalent thing that pops up is the anxiety? Because I'm thinking back, I didn't realize I had anxiety at the time. I didn't realize it. I look back now, yes, I did. And do I today? Yes. And I've learned to manage it better. But I could imagine, of course, in being in survival mode, that popped up a lot. Like I walked around very anxious, very stressed all the time. I can remember he was about 3 weeks old, and we went to the grocery store. It was our big first outing, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
put him in the shopping cart in his little carrier, and my husband always at the time always pushed the cart, right? And I just remember starting to walk, and not that I really thought he would do this, but anxiety rose up in me, and I turned around to him and said, "Don't you let go of that shopping cart." I had this fear that he was going to let go and someone was going to take him. Like that
Mm-hmm.
anxiety rose up in me. I mean, I don't know if that's common with other, but I just had this overwhelming protectiveness that showed up the
Mm-hmm.
first time we went out in public with him.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and the thing is to some extent, there's some normalcy of that. Like, that's, part of how we're designed as moms to be mama bears, to be protective of these little humans that can't protect themselves. Like, there's all these other creatures that when their babies are born, they can run off by themselves. We have these little completely dependent little
Yeah.
humans. And they do need moms that are going to be on alert for them because it's not like they can be like, ooh, there's a threat, let me run away. They need us to
Yeah.
care for them. So
Right.
there is a natural part that we are more on alert. That's part of why like pregnant moms and new moms still have a heightened sense of smell. They've decided that that's really so that we can sense threats and things like that,
Sure.
that we might, oh, there's fire. We should do something about that.
Right.
And so we have these natural instincts to be protective. And my opinion about most things in all of mental health world and just life in general is that everything's on a spectrum. Like being on alert more, being a little bit more anxious, that's normal. It's when it gets out of control that you're like, oh gosh, we should do something about this.
Right.
Being a little, you know, I think about even like when you're a mom and your kid has a sickness. It's like, oh, their fever's raised a little. Okay, cool. Good to know something's going on there. We don't necessarily need to do anything about it. We're just going to notice something's going on there. But,
Mhm.
oh, their fever's 104. Let's do something about that.
Right.
And we need to pay attention to that within our anxieties and our worries. Is how much
Exactly.
is it impacting us? Is this I should notice this and take a couple deep breaths and move forward? Or is this oh, I should get some help for this?
I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions about this episode, or really anything that has to do with trauma. So you can comment below, or you can reach out to me at asklisatickle@gmail.com. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.
Right, right. And that's the fine balance that we need to find, because I know in my case, being in survival mode, I was already hyper alert, right? Hyper
Hmm.
vigilant about everything around me, and then God forbid something happened. And then it was
Yeah.
just over the top. My
Yeah.
reaction to it was so over the top. And
Hmm.
so, I know that those of us that are healing from our trauma, a lot of us deal with that. And then when you've got a new mom who's got hormones going through her body, and she's, yeah, and everything that's going on that we just described, it's got to be, I can remember for me how hard it was. So, what are some tips that we can give these moms to help them with this anxiety and all these emotions and thoughts and feelings that are going through our heads?
Well, my first thing is I want to just reassure all those moms out there that might be feeling that A, you're not crazy.
Yes. Yes, you're
That's the first
normal.
step.
You're
You're
normal.
not crazy. It is normal to be feeling anxiety as a new mom, and even more normal for you to have more anxiety if you have a traumatic past. And that's okay, and that's normal. Because I think one of the first things that can happen is you start to freak out that, what am I crazy? Am I going crazy? And then
Yes.
worrying about that just makes it worse. So the
Yeah, yeah,
first
you
thing
spiral.
is you're not crazy. The second thing is, getting back to as much basic self care as possible.
Hmm.
And this is true whether you're a new mom or, frankly, if you're a mom of a teenager or somebody out of the house, even. Moms, we're not the best at self care.
Hmm.
We constantly put ourselves on the back burner. We're so busy doing all these other things. But I think it's especially true. I have never met a new mom that is doing really well with what I call the big five of self care. And the big five are the five things that if we do these things, it's not that it fixes everything in life, but rather that it just makes everything in life a little bit easier to cope with.
Yes.
And they're kind of the foundation. And to me, if you do anything, you should start with these big five. And frankly, if I have a client come to me for therapy, we start with these big five, because it doesn't matter how great of a therapist I am for that 1 hour. If we're not doing these big five, you're still going to be a hot mess. So we always start
when you're not in therapy, right? Or
yes,
through life.
Yes. So the big five in my book, the things that you need to be paying attention to, whether you're a new mom or not, is eat, sleep, move, fresh air and sunshine, and spirituality and or community.
I love it.
And when you look at those 5 things, I have never met a new mom that is eating right, sleeping right, moving right, getting outside, and having spirituality and community practices that looked anything like it was before. And that is not a blame game. That is just the situation of motherhood makes that really, really hard.
Right.
And so trying to find little ways to get back on track with that. Things like, really with the eating, the big thing I push from a mental health perspective is hydration. So lots of water and protein. Protein helps to even out your blood sugars, and blood sugars that are all over the place can trigger cortisol releases that triggers anxiety. So the more we can stabilize our blood sugars, the more our cortisol stabilizes. Yes. So water and protein are the big ones that I talk about with all my clients. So that's eat. Sleep is a mess when you got a newborn, but making sure that you try to whenever you can. If you need to invite a friend over, a family member, if you need to tag in your partner, if you need to, I've had, when I had babies, I had some friends come over and, can I hold a baby while you take a nap? And I was like, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, that sounds perfect. Like, they're like, do you need anything? I'm like, yes, here, hold this.
I'm going to go sleep.
And so you take a nap. So like finding it as many ways as you can to get as good sleep as you can, and not stressing too much about the baby's sleep. Because ironically, when moms stress about how much their baby is sleeping or not, it tends to actually make the mom's sleep worse. Yeah. So if you need to, bring that baby into bed to snuggle while you take a nap, then you do it. Like, you do the things that you need to do for your sanity to get as much sleep as possible. So eating, sleeping, moving, obviously right after you've given birth or had a C-section or whatever, there's some limitations. But being able to, find ways that are small things to start moving. I love, there's a model that's 5-5-5, and I feel like I'm suddenly going to forget it now that I'm bringing it up, but it's like the first 5 days you should hang out in bed. The next 5 days you should hang out on bed. So you should still basically be resting. And then the next 5 days you should be near the bed. So we're talking 15 days after birth that you shouldn't be like trying to go for runs or whatever, gosh, no, and cleaning the whole house or whatever. Sedentary. But then the rest of motherhood, finding little ways to be active with that baby. Strap that baby to you and go for a walk. Yeah. Hang out with your teenagers. I like to have any kind of harder conversations with my teenagers by going for a walk in the neighborhood with them. Gets them out of the house, away from their siblings that might be trying to eavesdrop. Gives us parallel instead of having to stare at each other in the eyes. Yes. We can like be next to each other as we talk about some of the harder things. So you can incorporate movement into so many different parts of motherhood. And notice I'm saying movement, not working out, not exercise, because I want this to be something that you enjoy. Like, it shouldn't be, I have to do this. If you love going to the gym, if you love going to the gym, by all means, make that part of your life. Right. But if you're like, I hate going to the gym, find movement that you enjoy. If you love to dance to music, if you love to go for walks or do yoga, or, I live in Colorado, so in the winter I love snowboarding, in the summer I love paddleboarding. Like, I like to move in those ways. So, but movement when you've got a fresh baby can be hard. So finding little things, but again, mothers across the lifespan, we find different ways, and it looks different in different seasons. Right. Fresh air and sunshine, minimum of 20 minutes a day whenever possible. Even if that just means you're sitting outside and drinking a cup of coffee outside. Yep. It does not have to be dramatic, but you can double dip with your movement, which is always fun. And then the last one, spirituality and community. And the big reason that that's so foundational for our self-care is it connects us to something bigger than ourselves. A lot of times when we're dealing with depression or anxiety or just that ick of life, we get really, it's like the world kind of closes in on us.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So we tend to be really focused on ourselves. We're really focused on our kids. We're really focused on whatever it is immediately around us. But that community and spirituality connection kind of reminds us that there's a whole world out there.
Yeah, there's more than just us.
Yes. And that tends to have a huge impact on people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's kind of my quick and dirty version of it.
I like it. I like it. I like it. I was going to bring up something too that for those moms, because I can remember when Corey was pretty little. I'm thinking he was not even, maybe he was a month old, maybe 6 weeks old. And there was just this one night that he started crying, just crying. It was in the evening and he wouldn't stop. And of course, this is, into probably 4 or 5 weeks into not much sleep, right? And I just remember looking up at my husband and saying, you need to take him. I need a minute. I need a minute, and I literally, I set him down on the couch and I walked out of the room and he took him and walked outside and he was able to finally get him calmed down. But I hit my max and I felt horrible about the fact that I hit my max, right? And not, now that I look back on it, well, of course I did, it was a setup.
And you did it just like, it sounds to me like you did it just how I would recommend. You recognized you had hit your max. And instead of like just completely losing it, you're like, here, take care of this small human. And then you took care of what you needed.
Yeah.
Like, to me, there's nothing to feel bad about. Like, we do all hit our max. It's what we do when we get there.
Exactly. And I recognize that now, but looking back, I was so hard on myself. I was so hard.
Totally.
I again, it's that idea of, I'm a mom now. I'm supposed to have this all together. I'm supposed to know what to do. I'm supposed to have this all together. No, I did not.
Yeah. Well, and how many of us do that? We should all over ourselves. We're constantly, you should this, you should that. And that is not just the new moms, that is all of us. And so we have to be cautious about that. And that is one of another way that kind of our past stuff can come up, because a lot of times those shoulds that we're doing to ourselves are internalized voices of someone from our past. And so we might be like I even had a friend ask me recently, she's like, who told you that? Because I had said something that as if it was truth and it just wasn't. It was like about myself. And she's like, who told you that? I was like, I don't know. Good question.
Right?
But we carry this stuff. And it's like, so moments in parenting, I feel like the first couple of years are kind of like an obvious time because we're so worn down physically and it's new and we don't know what we're doing. But then like the toddler years when they're tantruming and like they're out of control and we can't get them to, calm down, and we feel like we should be able to contain them because we're the adults, and like we're a bad parent if they're doing this, like all these different interpretations we put onto things. Then as we launch them into school and we have all these worries as they're away from us the whole time and we don't know who they're going to be surrounded by, all the peer struggles. If we had peer struggles, then we worry about that for them.
Yep.
If, a lot of times for people who had any kind of trauma as a child, a big time for their issues to be highlighted is when your child gets to that age. So like if you had a trauma at age 14, when your child hits age 14, you may not even be thinking of it that way, but you may start to have more conflict with that child. You may start to worry about that child. You may start to have your own stuff start to bubble up.
Totally.
In that stage. So there's just like a billion, I could literally talk about this all day long, that there's so many different ways that our own junk tends to come out in the motherhood journey.
One of the rules that I have set for myself that I'm getting much better at is I try not to say anymore, I should have, whatever. I should have done this, or I should have done, because, it just keeps us back there and it doesn't benefit me at all. If I go back and I look at it, I'm like, what could I learn from that experience? I made that choice, and why did I make that choice? And, what could I do different going forward, instead of, I should have, because there's such regret there. and it's such
And
a
kind of a
difference.
blame. Yeah.
Totally. It's totally a blame. And I was so good at blaming myself. I was really, really good at blaming myself. So I just kind of talked a little bit about my reaction when my son was crying and my emotions were rising up. But I wanted to talk about a little more about ways that these new moms can regulate their system, their nervous system, because it's on high alert for, like we talked about, for so many reasons, and they're going to get triggered a lot.
I try to make things as simple as possible when it comes to regulation of nervous system. And a couple of things that are really foundational to it. The easiest one is breathing, because you can literally do that anywhere. There are so many great breathing techniques. You can use apps for it, but literally, one of my absolute favorite ones is called 4-7-8 breathing. And it's just that you inhale for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you exhale for a count of 8. And you repeat several times. There's no specific number of how many, but there's a couple of benefits to this kind of breathing. It's why it's my favorite. One is it takes some focus. It takes a decent amount of focus to breathe and count, and especially after you've held your breath for 7, to release slowly for 8 takes focus and control.
Yeah. Totally.
Because our instinct is to exhale real fast after we hold our breath. So it's actually a decent amount of effort. So if your brain's spiraling about something, like I'm worrying about such and such and my kid's gonna, oh my gosh, whatever, to take that time to do that, it takes your brain off of whatever you're spiraling onto. It takes it onto this. And the numbers are specific because it actually rebalances your blood gases to such a level that is more soothing to your nervous system.
Oh, so the 4-7-8 or just breath work?
4-7-8.
Okay, good to know. Okay.
Yeah, so the 4-7-8 is my favorite one to use with my clients. And I use it for myself sometimes. Like if I'm in the middle of traffic or something.
Yeah.
Or, if something has me triggered. I'm trying to think of something recently. Oh, yeah. The other day I was late to something, and I hate being late. And I was stuck, it was kind of a traffic thing, but it was more we late, and we kind of started off wrong. And I was noticing I was just feeling tense.
Yep.
And it wasn't anything terrible, but I'm I just did 2 rounds of 4-7-8 breathing while I'm just sitting there holding my steering wheel, and okay, we're good. And it kind of helped to reset my system. So breathing, there are a lot of different breathing techniques. Frankly, I think whatever you feel like works for you is great. I like the 4-7-8 one because I like really concrete things, and it works for me. So 4-7-8 breathing is a great one for your system.
I was using the box breathing.
Yep.
But I'm going to try, I don't know where my pencil is. I got to write that down, but I want to remember that because I used to, breathing is my number one go-to. Breathing and walking. But the breathing is the thing that, like you say, you can do it anywhere and it really helps. And it does help calm me down. But I like the idea of the 4-7-8 because you have to focus on it more than the box breathing. It's just 4-4-4-4. So I'm going to have to remember that and try that.
Yeah, I love breathing. And I'm glad that you said that your other one is walking, because my next tip is that anxiety, trauma, all of that is a very physical experience. If you think about how all animals are meant to respond, think about a deer. They get startled. They're going to do the initial freeze.
Right.
And then they're going to run. And they're going to keep running. And all of that cortisol is going to get processed out of their system. What do we tend to do in our society? Most of us are pretty sedentary. So we get stressed out and we'll sit there. And all this cortisol is just kind of marinating our body. And so I find it can be something as simple as walking. It could be push-ups against a wall, because that's a very physical resistance thing. It can be dancing. It can be holding heavy things. Pick up that kid of yours and give that kid a big hug and feel the pressure of that kid against you, and they'll feel the pressure against them, and you both get to have the regulation in that moment from that physical sense. So being able to have a very physical way of processing that out of your body can be really helpful.
Yeah, one of the things that I picked up on a few months ago that I really love is the vibration plate. Have you ever done that?
I haven't.
Some people love it and some people don't. I love it. And it was interesting because I started doing it for various reasons, more for the lymphatic part of it,
Mm-hmm.
to get that out of my system. And so I started researching it, and it is something that's really good for releasing your trauma as well. It's the whole
Mm-hmm.
movement, it's the whole but I can't tell you how different I feel when I get off. And you only do it for 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
makes
I've
a
heard
huge,
great things about it.
yeah.
Yeah. So, like, to me, movement and breathing is something that I can do anywhere. Like, I could be in the middle of my office building and be like, I could walk down the stairs and back up if I need to do something physical.
Mm-hmm.
I can breathe literally anywhere. Sometimes we don't always have access to things like vibrational plates or,
Right. Right.
a therapist, or I love a trauma informed massage therapist can be a really good way to kind of
Ooh.
access how to heal through your body. And they have very specific trauma informed therapists that are kind of trained to deal with stuff. And so there's just a lot of different things. But I would say, to me, anxiety, trauma, all of that is a very physical experience.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to remember that we can't fix it by just thinking our way out of it. It
Thank you.
usually needs to also come out of our body.
Exactly. That's the thing, is it needs to be released out of our body. And that's why I say trauma therapy is so important, because there's modalities that can specifically get them out of your body, where talk therapy isn't going to help. Talk therapy is going to cause more frustration in this
Yes.
scenario,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's some great, anybody who knows somatic therapy. I'm
Yes.
trained in both EMDR and brain spotting, which are both, they're actually quite related, but they both are based on the idea that they're both brain body
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
therapies. And so they incorporate more of the somatic process. They're not just saying, well, what do you think about that? We ask questions like, well, where do you feel that in your body right now?
Mm-hmm.
And let's notice that, because a lot of times when we've had trauma, we've become very disconnected with our bodies.
Yes.
And part of the healing needs to come from being reconnected with it. So, but yeah, EMDR and brain spotting, somatic therapies, dance and movement therapies. I have a friend who does equine assisted therapy,
Oh, yeah.
and all sorts of different things that are out there that aren't just traditional talk therapy. I do a ton of talk therapy, so I'm not bashing it by any stretch.
No, no, no. There's a place for it.
And
Absolutely.
and I think that it should be coupled with these other options when you are trying to process trauma that's deeply stored in your brain and body.
Right, right. Especially when you're at the beginning of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've done EMDR and it was amazing for me. It was fast. I was
Mm-hmm.
surprised at how fast it was, but it was really, it was the best therapy that I ever had, actually, out of all the
Mm-hmm.
therapies that I've had. That one, I would,
Yeah.
I'll go back to it. But yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was great. Made
Yeah.
such a
It's really
difference.
great. Yeah, and I think one of the things, I love how you say it's fast. One of the things to point to also is it tends to be faster the closer to the trauma. So a
Yeah.
lot of times people tend to think, let me see if I can handle this on my own. And then if I can't, I'll go get help. And if anybody's listening and thinking that, I just want to encourage you to get help sooner rather than later,
Yes.
because it will go faster than basically the way it works is it's kind of like our brain is really good at connecting things. So, say we've all had traumas, whether they're huge traumas or little traumas throughout our life, whether it was a broken arm when we were 6 or it was child abuse. Like we've had traumas, and our brain connects these traumas and teaches it this is how we respond when something's bad. So, when we have a new trauma, say a car accident, say a birth trauma. I do a lot of birth trauma work, and I love when I get to do it within the first couple of weeks after birth. It's so powerful, and the healing is phenomenally fast.
Hmm.
But if you can do it within the first couple of weeks to within the first couple of months after whatever the new trauma is, the trauma doesn't have time to connect itself to every other previous trauma. So you get to work on this new trauma without it being so entrenched and connected to everything else. And that's
Oh,
part of why
wow.
it's such a powerful, fast healing. But if you wait and you're like, well, maybe I won't need help, I'll just try to deal with this on my own, 6 months seems to be a line where anything after that 6 month line, things start to connect themselves a whole lot more to all those
Oh,
past things. Now all of a sudden, that car accident is bringing up other feelings that you had of being out of control, or like when you got an injury in baseball or something.
yeah.
Like they connect themselves. But if you can do it as soon after the event as possible, it heals so much faster.
And it's so true because, and I've talked about this on my podcast, that I started my healing journey at 19 and there wasn't anything like this at all around. There was no trauma therapy. There wasn't even talk of trauma. There wasn't really even talk much of childhood abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And so my journey was very slow for a long time. And when when my healing began to speed up is when I started to getting into trauma therapy, specifically EMDR. That's when
Mm-hmm.
there was a huge difference, even though my trauma was very old,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it did. But man, I think part of it too is I was so hungry to let's get in. Let's dig this stuff out. I'm ready to get this past me. So
Yes.
maybe that's why it worked for me and I was so open
Mm-hmm.
to it. But yeah, it is, trauma therapy is so important, especially at the beginning. Don't try to do it on your own. You
Yes.
need the support.
Yes. And I get it because I'm one of those like strong-willed women too that I'm like I can do anything. Like I remodeled my bathroom by myself and I did all these things and I'm a therapist and so like I can do that to myself too where I'm like I should be able to handle this. And then it's like but wait, and I remember one of my friends called me on it. I had postpartum after my third baby, and she goes, and I was like, I should be able to handle this on my own. I literally treat people for this all the time. And she's just like, yeah, but if you were like a cardiovascular surgeon, would you try to do surgery on yourself? And I was like, but we expect ourselves to be able to fix ourselves in all these different areas.
Yeah.
And so, like, whether you're a therapist, a coach, or anybody else, if this is something you're struggling with, to seek help and to seek help early and often. Like, whenever you're starting to notice it come back up, reach out for that help because again, the sooner you catch it, the better it is. It's like cancer. Like if you catch cancer when it's just barely beginning, you can often take that out real easily and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have any huge ramifications. So if you catch that trauma real easily, we can often scrape that out real quick. It might have some lingering things, but for the most part, it'll be okay. Whereas if you find cancer at stage 4, it's going to be a longer treatment process. It's going to be riskier. It's going to have bigger implications for your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And same thing, I mean, another analogy would be like a bullet wound. If catch a bullet wound right after it happened and you take it out and you heal it up, we're good. But if you let that bullet just sit in there, you can get lead
Fester.
poisoning and you can get infections and you can have all sorts of problems. So let's dig it out, even though the digging out can sometimes be painful.
It
And
is painful.
then let's heal it up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. We need to get this past us. And there's a statistic that one of my guests had and I share it a lot and it's just so surprising every time I say it, is that on average women who are sexually abused, it's between the ages of 13 and 17, and they don't share that for 4 decades. They
Mm.
suffer for 4 decades. And I know in my experience, and you probably can say so as well, it wasn't just sexual abuse. I know that women I worked with that
Mm-hmm.
had all the different types of abuse didn't
Mm-hmm.
share it. I was one of them. My abuse was not sexual abuse. My abuse was a lot of the other abuses, and I didn't even share mine. And I checked with a friend who knew me since I was 15 years old, and this was about a year or so ago, and I said, "Did I ever talk about it?" She said, "No."
Mm-hmm.
So, we suffer, and we don't need to suffer in silence. We
Yeah.
don't need to do it, and we need to. I feel like I would love to see mental health come like physical health, where you go to the doctor when you don't feel good, so you go to your mental health doctor when you're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. It is not weak. We're not. We've spent a lifetime trying to figure this out on our own, and we don't have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
We need someone to come along and give us. We've got blind spots, right?
Absolutely, we all do. And, whenever I primarily work with moms, and whenever I get a new mom in my office and she's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm just such a bad mom. I'm like, well, I could tell you right now that you're not.
Because
And
you
I
were
know
already
you.
worried.
I'm like, the fact that you're here, the fact that you made the phone call, you filled out the paperwork, and you showed up in my office to work with me, that tells me you're not a bad mom. And second, the fact that you're even worried about being a bad mom
Yep.
tells me you're not a bad mom. Because I used to work in social services where parents had their kids removed, and they would be, objectively seen as bad parents by the majority of the world. These were the abusers. These were the people that were high on drugs and neglecting their children. And those parents would swear on everything that they were great parents. So it's the good parents that are worrying about being bad parents.
Yeah, that was a big worry of mine all the time. All the time.
All the time. Yeah.
Always on
Yeah.
the forefront. Still to this day. He's
I
30.
talked to so many people about it, and that's part of why I created the Everyday Supermoms podcast. The podcast that I have doesn't have. It's not about highlighting people being perfect parents. I don't believe in perfect parents. It is about sharing honest stories and experiences with motherhood, and they've dealt with some hard things. We talk about things like maternal mental health. We talk about postpartum depression and anxiety and insomnia. We've talked about adoption and infertility. We've talked about child loss. We've talked about divorce and co-parenting and remarriage, and we've talked about military life, and like, this is just me rattling them off as fast as I can, but like, we talk about all sorts of things, and it's not just the pretty side. It's the, gosh, being a mom is freaking hard. And I believe that every mom can be a super mom. So it's kind of that helping moms to not feel alone in the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And to be inspired that no matter what has happened to us, we are not defined by our past. We are not defined by whatever hardship we are facing. We can be a super mom as we step forward and be the mom we're meant to be to our kids.
I love that. I love that. Well, let me ask you one last question. What would you like to leave our listeners with?
I think kind of just a little bit of what I just said, that no matter what has happened to you, you are not defined by your past, that you have the potential to heal, to grow, and to become a phenomenal human as you continue to do so. And that if you're a mom and you know you've got some baggage, to not be afraid to address that so that you can help your kids to have the best mom that they deserve.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So Amy, if anybody wanted to reach out to you and contact you, how would they do that? And we'll have this in the show notes as well.
Yeah. And the easiest way to reach me is through Instagram at Hey Amy Grace. You can also find my website at amygrace.bio. And you can actually get connected to my private practice in Colorado. I can only work with Colorado residents. However, I do offer coaching specifically related to motherhood for people that even aren't in Colorado. So all of that information can be found through those two places. And please check out the Everyday Supermoms podcast to hear some really amazing stories of supermoms just like you.
Oh, well, thank you, Amy. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for your work. It's so important, and helping those kiddos out and their moms. It's just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.